I feel like when it comes to having people over at your house, something that's really important is making sure you have at least one recipe you can kind of just throw together and forget about so you can clean your house and your kitchen not be too dirty. For me, I always make this beef stew that everyone always asks me about because it's pretty flexible and I can use literally anything I have in the house and anything I get from the supermarket. I'm going to start off by chopping up 3 onions because we're just going to caramelize them and they're going to get really small. I know that sounds like a lot of onions, but trust the process. We're building a flavor base. I had to run down to the store to get a few more onions because I only had one single white onion, but I just got 3 cheap yellow onions for like 89 cents a piece. I feel like I've experimented with this recipe enough to know for sure that you don't really need to do too much. You really just gotta make sure your onions are chopped even, make sure you have your beef for the stew, and some mashed potatoes or a starch. Personally, I normally eat this with just mashed potatoes and it lasts me for a while, but I don't really like adding in vegetables into the stew itself outside of the onions. I'd rather just have roasted vegetables on the side. If you're new here, hi, I'm Amare. This is just how I like to cook. I cook a lot and really just like showing other people, but totally ignore the way that I'm chopping this onion right now. I'm ashamed watching this in hindsight, but if you like what you see and you need some dinner ideas or just generally things to cook, or maybe you just like watching or need to feel inspired, just like and subscribe. I'm here like twice a week. Word of advice is that in the end, it doesn't really matter how you chop your onions. Just make sure they're all chopped and preferably around the same size. And now that everything's in the pot, I'm going to go ahead and start to caramelize them. But first, I always make sure I cover them in some oil. And we're just going to stir them until they get brown and kind of jammy how I like. Onions are always an essential when it comes to building a flavor base for soup or stew. And I just can't describe the flavor that caramelized onions adds into like anything you put them into. While all this was happening, I baked my baguette and my ciabatta I made the night before. And now we're going to go back to making sure we're stirring those onions. When the onions start to get kind of translucent, we know they're kind of starting to do their thing and they're doing what we need them to do. The onions are onioning. You're doing a good job caramelizing. Do not be afraid. It just takes a long time. Normally, to get them as dark as I want, it takes me about 45 minutes at least. It just kind of depends on the day. But once you start getting good at caramelizing onions, really nobody can tell you anything and you can kind of rule the world. So mine kind of started clumping together a bit, so I went in with a splash of water and just kept stirring until they were dark and jammy like I wanted. And once I finally got them how I wanted, I'm using the same pot for this all, so I just set it to the side off heat. You can totally do this part in advance, but I'm going to go ahead and start working on my garlic. I'm just going to use 3 cloves of garlic, but I'm sure you could get away with using a whole head if you like garlic a lot. In order to get my cloves out pretty quickly, I normally cut off the top and the bottom a bit like an onion and just peel everything off. Overall, off camera, I really think that it takes me about 20 minutes or so to get this ready normally. Normally, I would have done the caramelized onions the night before. And something I totally recommend as well is doing everything the night before and letting it sit in the fridge so you can just turn it on when you get up the next day. And now I'm going to do that thing I learned online where I just mash them with the knife. You can also totally just chop them up with a knife. That's what I normally do anyway. I just felt like I was in a rush. And now we're going to saute those with the onions, but we're only going to saute them for about 10 seconds or until we can smell them. And as soon as we do that, we're going to go in with the Guinness, which is kind of the star today. Normally I just use a porter or a stout when I don't have like a Belgian ale that I can use. I just been experimenting. This was my first time using a Guinness and it came out fine. And plus you can find that at nearly any corner store or gas station. Nobody asked, but I found out that 1 can of beer is 2 cups, so I just used the whole can. So this is actually kind of important because we're going to be doing a 1-to-2 ratio with the beer and the beef broth. So you're going to want to do 1 cup of beer for every 2 cups of beef broth that you're going to use or vice versa. And as soon as my garlic gets fragrant, I just go ahead and pour the beer straight in. I never really have beef broth on hand unless I'm making this, so I'm just going to use 2 beef bouillon cubes and then add in 3 bay leaves and let everything simmer while I get the meat ready. So for this, you're going to want to use any type of stew meat or tough cut of meat that you cook for a long time. And I'm just going to season mine with salt and pepper because a lot of flavor is going to come from that beer. Normally I get a whole chuck roast, but I just got this one that was thinly sliced in advance. And now we're just gonna pan sear them on medium high on each side for about a minute. Now this recipe is fairly simple and easy to go through. I really don't like cooking with anything too fancy, and I like using things that anybody can find at the grocery store because I don't feel like running around to multiple. I'm someone who has the time to go to multiple grocery stores, but not the patience. And we're gonna sear these just so they have a little bit of extra flavor to add into the stew so it doesn't taste totally flat and we get a little bit of something extra. And sometimes I pre-flour these before I actually sear them just to help the stew thicken up a bit at the end. But instead of pre-flouring them today, I'm just going to add in some flour later on and whisk it in. But if you have cornstarch, you can just do that too. Or you can just cook it longer with no lid on. And I don't have any secret recommendation or technique I like to do here. This really just does not take long at all. It took me less than a minute or two just to sear all of the meat. And as we get done searing the meat, we're just going to pick it up and put it straight into the stew. And we're just going to plop all of these straight in there. Just make sure they're all fully covered by the liquid. And now we're going to go ahead and add in a few sprigs of our thyme. I really do like thyme, and it's something I buy every single week. Now, something I don't really see people do too often is adding in a splash of vinegar before they start cooking it, because it just gives it a little bit of extra taste and a little bit of And now we're just going to let this sit in the oven at 300 degrees for 4 hours while I go do laundry. 2 hours in, I like to give it a stir. And now that it's been 4 hours, we're just going to go ahead and take out our bay leaves and thyme. Well, if you can find them in there somewhere. And I'm going to be adding in a little bit of Dijon mustard, which isn't something that I normally do, but I just have it and knew it would taste really good in this. And now I'm going to be adding in a little bit of flour just to help thicken it up, and I'm going to whisk it in until it's thick as I want, but some people add in a slice of bread with mustard on it. Use a fork if you don't have a whisk. I'm doing a spoon right now because I'm pretty stubborn. And at this point, while you're stirring in this stuff, your meat is probably going to start breaking up and falling apart because it's going to be really tender at this point. And now our beef stew is finally done and we only have 2 dirty dishes. Plus, my baguette came out really good, so nobody can tell me anything.